Hook, Palermo, Italy. They dragged the Mafia King's son into the square before sunrise. Hundreds watched in silence. The rival families believed they were witnessing the end of the De Luca bloodline. One gunshot echoed through the streets. The heir collapsed. By sunset, every newspaper in Sicily carried the same headline: "The future of the De Luca Empire is dead." But there was one terrifying problem. They had executed the wrong twin. Act 1. The execution. The first light of dawn crept across the rooftops of Palermo, Sicily, but the city did not wake to the sound of church bells. It woke to fear. In the center of Piazza Pretoria, black luxury vehicles surrounded the ancient square. Armed men in tailored suits stood shoulder to shoulder, their expressions cold and unreadable. Residents peered from balconies. Shopkeepers kept their shutters closed, and tourists were hurried away by anxious police officers who knew better than to interfere. Everyone understood what was happening. The Romano family had called a public execution, not of an ordinary man, of the son of the most powerful mafia king in Italy. Bound to a wooden chair in the middle of the square sat Luca De Luca, heir to the De Luca Empire. His white shirt was stained with blood from the beating he had endured through the night, yet his face remained calm. He lifted his head and looked at the sky, refusing to give his enemies the satisfaction of seeing fear in his eyes. Across from him stood Don Vittorio Romano, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and carrying the quiet confidence of a man who believed victory was already his. Vittorio stepped forward with a slow smile. "For 30 years, he said, his voice echoing across the silent square, "your father ruled Sicily through fear." He paused, letting every word settle over the crowd. "Today, the De Luca name dies with you." A heavy silence followed. Luca simply smiled. The expression unsettled everyone watching. Even Vittorio's closest men exchanged uncertain glances. "You still think you've won?" Vittorio asked. Luca's voice was steady. "No." He looked directly into Vittorio's eyes. "I think you just made the biggest mistake of your life." For a fraction of a second, Vittorio hesitated. Then he laughed. "A dead man has no secrets." He raised a polished pistol. The square seemed to stop breathing. One shot. The sound cracked through Palermo like thunder. Luca's body slumped forward. A woman screamed from a nearby balcony. Church pigeons burst into morning sky. Without another word, the Romano convoy disappeared into the narrow Sicilian streets, leaving behind a city frozen in horror. Within an hour, television stations across Italy interrupted their broadcasts. Breaking news. Luca De Luca, only son and heir of Mafia King Don Alessandro De Luca, has been executed in Palermo. By noon, international media carried the same story. The De Luca Empire had lost its future. Inside the De Luca estate, black flags were lowered. Senior Capo stood in silence as Don Alessandro entered the family chapel. No tears fell from the old king's eyes. He placed a weather hand on the closed coffin and whispered just 4 words. "Forgive me, my son." Outside, hundreds of black-clad mourners gathered beneath the estate's towering cypress trees. Helicopters circled overhead, while reporters crowded the gates, convinced they were witnessing the end of one of Italy's most feared dynasties. No one noticed a lone figure standing on a distant hillside beyond the cemetery. He wore a dark coat and kept his face hidden beneath the brim of a cap. From that distance, he watched every moment of the funeral. When the coffin disappeared beneath the earth, he removed his cap. His face was identical to the man everyone believed had just been buried. He whispered into the wind, "They buried my brother." His eyes hardened with quiet resolve. Now, they'll learn which twin they should have feared. Act 2. The twin nobody knew existed. The cemetery emptied before sunset. Black umbrellas disappeared through the iron gates. Reporters packed away their cameras, and the mournful echoes of funeral bells faded into the Sicilian evening. Only one man remained hidden among the ancient olive trees overlooking the De Luca estate. Matteo De Luca, the brother the world had never known. He stared at the fresh grave, unable to move. Every instinct told him to walk down the hill, to stand beside his father, to mourn openly. But he couldn't. If anyone saw him alive, everything Luca had sacrificed would be in vain. A tear slipped down his face. "It should have been me," he whispered. 23 years earlier, the De Luca twins were only 5 years old when the first attempt on their lives was made. A car bomb exploded outside their family's vineyard, killing 3 bodyguards. That night, Don Alessandro made a decision that only 4 people would ever know. One son would become the public heir. The other would disappear into the shadows. From that day forward, Luca attended public events, appeared in family photographs, and was introduced to politicians, businessmen, and rival families as the future Don. Matteo vanished from public life. He was educated in private estates across Sicily, trained by retired military officers, intelligence experts, forensic accountants, cybersecurity specialists, and historians of organized crime. While Luca learned how to lead an empire everyone could see, Matteo learned how to protect one no one could. The twins met only in secret. Every few months, they exchanged identities for short periods, confusing anyone who might be watching. Even seasoned assassins never realized there were 2 identical heirs. It became the De Luca family's greatest secret. 3 nights before the execution, the brothers sat together on the balcony of the old Palermo villa overlooking the sea. Luca poured 2 glasses of red wine. "If anything happens," he began. Matteo interrupted immediately. "Don't." Luca smiled sadly. "You always hated these conversations, because they sound like goodbye." For a long moment, neither brother spoke. Finally, Luca reached into his jacket and placed a silver pocket watch on the table. It had belonged to their grandfather, the founder of the De Luca Empire. "If I don't come back..." Matteo pushed it away. "You will." Luca looked out toward the Mediterranean. "No." His voice was almost a whisper. "You'll carry what's left." The brothers embraced. Neither realized it would be the last time. Present day, Matteo entered a secluded underground chamber beneath the family's oldest estate. Only a handful of people even knew it existed. Maps of Sicily covered the stone walls. Digital surveillance screens flickered beside centuries-old weapons displayed in glass cases. This wasn't just a bunker. It was a hidden command center built for the unseen heir. Waiting inside were 3 of Don Alessandro's most trusted advisors: former intelligence chief Marco Cani, veteran strategist Gianni Ferraro, and family lawyer Elena Ricci. None of them looked surprised to see him. Marco spoke first. They believe that the Luca bloodline ends with Luca. Matteo nodded silently. "For now." Gianni placed a thick file on the table. "We've identified the convoy route." Matteo frowned. "What convoy?" "The one only 6 people knew about." Silence filled the room. Elena slowly opened the file. The Romano family intercepted Luca's exact location. She looked directly into Matteo's eyes. They didn't find him. They were told. Matteo's expression changed instantly. Someone hadn't guessed. Someone had betrayed them. He slowly closed the file, then spoke the words that chilled everyone in the room. "My brother wasn't killed by our enemies." He looked at each of them in turn. He was sold to them. The room fell silent, because if Matteo was right, the traitor was still inside the De Luca Empire. Act 3. The Traitor Within. Rain hammered against the stone walls of the underground command center. The silence after Matteo's accusation was heavier than the storm outside. No one wanted to believe it, but everyone knew he was right. Don Alessandro had changed Luca's travel plans only an hour before the convoy left the estate. The revised route had been shared verbally, never written down. Only 6 people had known it: his father, Luca, Matteo, Marco Cani, Gianni Ferraro, Elena Ricci, and yet the Romano family had been waiting at the exact location. It wasn't luck. It was betrayal. Matteo walked toward the wall-sized map of Sicily. The traitor wanted Luca dead. Marco folded his arms. Or perhaps they wanted the empire to collapse. Matteo shook his head. No. He pointed to Palermo harbor. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have attacked my father. His finger moved to the mountain road where Luca had been captured. They targeted the future. He turned to face everyone. They wanted to cut off the head before the crown changed hands. No one argued, because it made perfect sense. Across the city, inside the magnificent Palazzo Romano, Don Vittorio celebrated. Crystal glasses clink beneath golden chandeliers. The heads of Sicily's 5 most powerful mafia families gathered around a long mahogany table. A servant poured vintage Sicilian wine as musicians played softly in the background. For the first time in decades, the De Luca Empire looked vulnerable. Don Vittorio stood. "My friends," he raised his glass. "Today we witnessed history." The room applauded. The lion has lost its cub. Laughter echoed through the hall. But tomorrow, his smile faded. We removed the lion himself. The room fell silent. One elderly boss frowned. "Alessandro still commands loyalty." Vittorio leaned forward. Not for long. He reached into his jacket and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Inside, photographs, bank transfers, encrypted messages. Each one connected a trusted De Luca insider to the Romano family. The other bosses stared in disbelief. "You have a spy inside the De Luca Empire?" Vittorio smiled. "I don't have a spy." He paused. "I have a future king." Back at the De Luca estate, Don Alessandro sat alone in his study. The room was dimly lit by a single fireplace. Every shelf held memories of Luca's childhood. Old photographs, school awards, a wooden chessboard they played together every Sunday. The door opened quietly. Matteo stepped inside. For a long moment, neither father nor son spoke. Then Alessandro stood. He embraced Matteo so tightly that years of discipline finally broke. "I'm sorry." His voice cracked. "I asked your brother to live the life that should have been yours." Matteo closed his eyes. "He chose it. He chose it because he loved you." The old Don nodded slowly. "And now I buried one son." He looked into Matteo's eyes. "While the other must live like a ghost." Matteo reached into his coat and removed Luca's silver pocket watch. "I made him a promise." Alessandro recognized it immediately. His hands trembled. "He gave it to you." Matteo nodded. He knew. The old king looked toward the fire. "Then we finished what he started." Late that night, Marco Conti rushed into the command center carrying a laptop. "We've decrypted part of Luca's phone." Matteo stood instantly. "What did he leave?" Marco connected the device to a large screen. A short video appeared, recorded just hours before Luca's death. Luca looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," he smiled faintly, "I'm already dead." Everyone in the room froze. "There are names I couldn't tell father." His expression became serious. "The traitor isn't working alone." He paused. "They answer to someone much higher." The video suddenly glitched. Static filled the screen. Then one final image flashed for less than a second. A man wearing a black signet ring engraved with an ancient wolf crest. The recording ended. No name, no face, just a ring. Marco whispered, "I've never seen that symbol." But Don Alessandro had. The color drained from his face. He stared at the frozen image and whispered words no one expected. "Impossible." Matteo turned sharply. "You know that crest?" His father swallowed hard. "I prayed it had disappeared forever." He looked at the screen one last time. "That isn't the mark of a mafia family." He took a slow breath. "It's the seal of the 12. The room fell into stunned silence, because every powerful family in Italy knew one terrifying legend. The 12 didn't rule the mafia. They ruled the men who ruled the mafia. Act 4. The empire behind the empire. The room remained silent. No one dared speak. The name the 12 had not been uttered in decades. Most believed it was only an old Sicilian myth, something aging capos whispered to frighten reckless young soldiers. But Don Alessandro's face said otherwise. He slowly walked toward an old wooden cabinet and unlocked it with a brass key he wore around his neck. Inside lay a leather-bound journal. Its pages were yellow with age. On the cover was the same symbol, a wolf encircled by 12 stars. Matteo frowned. "You've had this all these years?" Alessandro nodded. "My father gave it to me the night he died." He opened the journal carefully. The first page carried a single handwritten warning. "If this seal returns, trust no one." Marco's voice was barely audible. "Who are they?" Alessandro stared into the fire before answering. "They aren't one family." They're 12. 12 bloodlines that have manipulated Sicily from the shadows for more than 2 centuries. They don't fight wars. They create them. They don't wear crowns. They decide who deserves one. A chill spread across the room. If the 12 truly existed, then the war between the De Lucas and the Romanos had never been the real battle. They had merely been pieces on someone else's chessboard. Meanwhile, at Palazzo Romano, Don Vittorio prepared for his greatest victory. The next morning, every remaining De Luca warehouse, port, and casino would be attacked simultaneously. It was a strike designed to cripple the empire before sunrise. His captains reviewed maps around a long oak table. Everything was ready. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. The guards reached for their weapons. A single emergency light flickered on. One of Vittorio's captains collapsed onto the table. A knife protruded from his chest. Panic erupted. Gunfire echoed through the mansion. By the time the generators restored power, 3 captains were dead. The walls were splattered with blood. And across the marble floor, written in crimson, were 4 chilling words. He chose the wrong king. Vittorio's confident smile vanished. For the first time, he looked afraid. Elsewhere, Matteo sat alone in the hidden command center. He studied maps, financial records, shipping manifests, and encrypted communications. Hours passed. Then something caught his eye. The recent attacks weren't random. Every location targeted by the Romanos shared one detail. They had all recently changed managers. Matteo compared the names. 6 businesses, 6 promotions, 6 different men. Yet every one of them had previously worked for the same logistics company, one secretly purchased months earlier through shell corporations. He smiled for the first time since Luca's death. "I found you." Marco looked over his shoulder. "What is it?" Matteo circled one signature. The traitor built an entire network before Luca died. This wasn't spontaneous betrayal. It was planned for years. Elena leaned closer. "Can we identify who's behind it?" Matteo nodded slowly. "Not yet, but we can force him into the open." The following evening, news spread across Sicily like wildfire. The De Luca family announced a meeting of all senior captains at the historic Villa San Michele. More than 60 loyal leaders were invited. Every surviving capo, every trusted advisor, every division commander. The invitation carried one message. The future of the De Luca Empire will be decided tonight. Marco looked at Matteo. "You know the traitor will come." Matteo smiled. "They have to, and if they don't, they'll expose themselves." Don Alessandro frowned. "You realize what you're doing?" Matteo nodded. "I'm giving them one last opportunity. To kill me." Silence filled the room. Then the old Don placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Your brother always believed you were the better strategist." Matteo looked toward the window where rain had finally stopped. He was the better man. And that's exactly why they feared him. Outside, hidden high on a distant hillside, a sniper adjusted the scope of a suppressed rifle. Crosshairs settled on the brightly lit windows of Villa San Michele. A gloved finger tightened on the trigger. Inside the villa, Matteo stepped onto the grand staircase to address every De Luca captain. He had no idea. Someone had already decided he would never finish his speech. Act 5. The wrong twin that created the grand hall of Villa San Michele fell silent as Matteo stepped onto the staircase. More than 60 De Luca captains stood below him, waiting to hear who would lead the empire after Luca's death. Outside, hidden nearly a kilometer away, a sniper steadied his breathing. His crosshairs rested squarely on Matteo's chest. One pull of the trigger, and the De Luca bloodline would truly end. The rifle cracked. The bullet shattered a crystal chandelier instead. The explosion of glass sent guests diving for cover. Before panic could take over, Matteo shouted, "Lock every door." Steel security shutters slammed over the villa's entrances. The sniper fired again. This time the bullet struck a marble pillar inches from Matteo's head. But Matteo didn't run. He looked directly toward the distant hillside, almost as if he knew exactly where the shooter was hiding. Within seconds, hidden De Luca security teams emerged from concealed positions around the estate. The sniper realized too late. He had walked into a trap. Inside the hall, chaos spread. Some captains reached for their weapons. Others looked around in confusion. Then Matteo raised one hand. Nobody moves. His calm voice cut through the fear. I invited all of you here tonight for one reason. He paused. Because my brother wasn't murdered by enemies. His eyes scanned every face. He was betrayed by family. The room froze. Matteo nodded toward Marco. The lights dimmed. A projector illuminated the far wall. Bank transfers, encrypted messages, shipping records, secret meetings. One by one, the evidence appeared. The room erupted in disbelief. Finally, Matteo displayed a single photograph. A respected De Luca captain shaking hands with Don Vittorio Romano. Gasps echoed through the hall. The man in the photograph slowly lowered his head. It was Johnny Ferraro, one of Don Alessandro's oldest friends. The man who had held Matteo as a baby. The strategist who had spent 30 years at the family side. Don Alessandro's face went pale. No, Johnny sighed. I never wanted Luca to die. Matteo stared at him. Then why betray us? Johnny looked toward the old Don. For 30 years I built this empire beside you. When your sons were children, I protected them. When your enemies attacked, I stood in front. His voice hardened. And when the time came to choose your successor, he looked at Matteo with bitterness. You chose blood over loyalty. Silence. Johnny laughed quietly. I gave my entire life to this family. But I would never wear a crown. He slowly removed a black ring from his finger. The wolf surrounded by 12 stars. The symbol of the 12. You thought I served the Romanos. He smiled. They serve us. The room stood frozen. Johnny wasn't merely a traitor. He was one of the 12. Suddenly, the villa's front doors exploded inward. Armed men stormed inside. Not Romanos. Not De Lucas. They wore identical black suits with silver wolf emblems. The 12. Gunfire erupted. Bodyguards rushed Don Alessandro to safety. Captains returned fire from behind marble columns. The elegant villa transformed into a battlefield. In the middle of the chaos, Matteo walked calmly toward Johnny. No weapon, no fear, only grief. You taught me strategy. Johnny nodded. I did. You taught me patience. I did. You also taught me. Matteo looked him directly in the eyes. That every chess master eventually overlooks one piece. Johnny frowned. What piece? Matteo smiled. My brother. At that exact moment, the giant screen behind them came alive. A second recording from Luca appeared. It had been scheduled to release automatically if Matteo ever activated the emergency protocol. Luca looked into the camera. If you're seeing this, then the traitor finally revealed himself. He smiled, which means Matteo won. Johnny's eyes widened. What? Luca continued. For years, Matteo and I knew someone inside our family was feeding information to our enemies. We just didn't know who. So we created one final test. The convoy, the route, my death. They weren't accidents. They were bait. The room fell silent. Luca's final words echoed through the hall. If I had to give my life to expose a man destroying our family from within... He smiled proudly. Then it was a price worth paying. The recording ended. Johnny staggered backward. For the first time in decades, the master strategist realized he had been outplayed. Not by Matteo, by the twin he believed he had defeated. Hours later, as dawn broke over Palermo, police discovered abandoned warehouses, frozen offshore accounts, and hidden ledgers that dismantled the 12 Sicilian operations. Don Vittorio Romano vanished into exile, his alliance shattered. The surviving members of the 12 disappeared into the shadows, their influence broken but not erased. At Luca's grave, Matteo placed a silver pocket watch on the headstone. I spent my life hiding behind your name. He smiled through tears. Now I'll spend the rest of it honoring yours. Don Alessandro stood beside his only surviving son. The De Luca Empire had endured, not because it was the strongest, not because it was the richest, but because two brothers had trusted each other more than they trusted power itself. And in the end, the world remembered the day the Mafia King's son was executed. But history would remember something far more important. The day the wrong twin became the most feared Don Sicily had ever known.